Darc'e Catalyst didn't know what she was getting into. But regardless, in order to save the man that she loved, she was willing to delve headfirst into the horrors and the darkness that would be found in the Dungeon of Fear and Hunger. Today, we will be learning the story of the woman that stood up to the gods. Hi, hello and welcome. Thank you very much for checking out my video. Today's video will be of a solo Darc'e run in Fear and Hunger 1 at normal difficulty. I will be relying a lot on Darc'e's skills, such as fast attack, defense stance, and counter. And in this video, we will be going solo against the Traces of Grogoroth, the god of fear and hunger, and we'll also see one of the endings in the void. Since it's a solo run, I'm not allowed to recruit anybody else into my party, other than using the Blood Golem spell. I will have Moonless in my party momentarily, and a skeleton for just a little bit, but the entire endgame, Darc'e will be doing it solo. So without further ado, let's get started. We'll be playing on the base difficulty. I am doing this as one of a series of videos in which I hope to become a better player and better familiarized with the game, and in the future I'll be releasing more content on the higher difficulties. So this is basically a warm-up for Terran Starvation and Hard mode. Why did I choose Darc'e? Because Darc'e is considered to be one of the easier characters to play with, or at least to get familiarized with the game with. She has very good starting gear, which I'm going to improve by going after Sir Seymour at the very beginning. And she has very good combat skills. So I thought she was a logical character for my first solo run in Fear and Hunger. Now it's time to learn the backstory of today's hero, Darc'e Catalyst, a knight of the Kingdom of Rondon, and member of the mercenary band, the Knights of the Midnight Sun. Darc'e was born with a soul of domination that makes people around her bend to her will. She is a natural leader, but is often blind to self-criticism. If your birth sign wasn't enough to warrant a future of greatness, you were also born into a wealthy noble family. At an early age, you were sent into training to become a holy knight of the Kingdom of Rondon. Training to become a squire was a harsh school that spared no one, no matter if you were from a noble origin or not. A practice sparring match between you and a well-seasoned squire took place at the central training grounds. It is said that a fighter shows their true colors in the first fight. This applies to you too. When you saw the sword coming your way, you raise your buckler in defense. This choice gives Darc'e the defense stance skill. As time went on, you proved to be a gifted fighter and a valuable asset to the kingdom. However, the Kingdom of Rondon claimed to follow the will of the gods in its pursuit for more power, but all the rewards seemed to fall into the laps of the elites and the nobles sitting comfortably behind castle walls. Ruthlessly, the kingdom would expand its reign, reducing the feeble citadels to ashes and bloodstains, enslaving the poor womenfolk while every man is slain. Only spare a child or two, that its legend may grow. Your devotion was shaken. You were all but ready to retire from the army, but your family insisted, no, they demanded, you to stay as a holy knight, or else you'd bring great shame to their noble family. Regardless, I choose to break ties. At this point, family ties waited no more than strangers you met at the dirty streets of Rondon. You completely cut ties with your family without hesitation. Just as you were about to flee from the army, things took an unexpected turn for you. You met a captain of a small mercenary army who seemed to share the same ill will towards the Kingdom of Rondon as you did. The common folk was starting to gather around the charismatic leader Legard, who shared humble origins similar to farmers and villagers alike. There was definitely something otherworldly in his stature. Legard saw potential in you, and with warm words, he almost seduced you to join his band of mercenaries. Thanks to your rigorous discipline, you took a high position in his army, in the Knights of the Midnight Sun. Your army was growing fast, in both size and influence in the western regions. The Kingdom of Rondon would first use your services to their own benefit, but soon saw you more as a possible threat to their modern reigns. Something changed with Legard as well. He kept more to himself and studied ancient texts and the occult. He became obsessed with some relics and artifacts that gave you ominous feelings and terrible nightmares. Things would only spiral towards madness even more when Legard decided to raid the northern capital, Odengard. Without a warning or negotiations, Legard killed everyone who stood in his way between him and this mysterious ancient relic. It was this small overblow that was enough of an excuse for the Kingdom of Rondon to turn common folk against Legard and justify his imprisonment. As the troops of the Rondon army marched towards your clearly smaller army, you had to choose which position to take in the coming encounter. The Knights of the Midnight Sun lost the fight. Many of your comrades were slain, but you managed to escape the battlefield. Legard was taken as a captive and to be used most likely as propaganda. You knew you didn't have much time before he would be sentenced to death, so you had to act fast. Even if it seemed like a suicide mission, you decided to save Legard from the prison he was held in. Before leaving for your desperate journey, you decided to stock up on equipment and items, but Darce decides to rush straight after him. And so Darce made her way to the accursed dungeon. Seeing a massive stone gateway open up in front of her, she realizes that she's finally arrived at the Dungeon of Fear and Hunger. Her original motivation was to save the mercenary captain Legard. Little did she know that the end of this trail led to her, just one woman, standing up against the traces of the old gods, leading to the birth of the god of fear and hunger, which will trigger a new era, the Cruel Age, which will set the stage for hundreds of years later, the Kaiser being able to create a new god, the Machine God. Darce enters the dungeon and feels her sanity decline with every passing moment. An unnatural hunger begins to eat away at her. Crossing the first threshold, she enters a room filled with meat-eating flies. The sound of these flies filled the darkness. As an accomplished mercenary, Darce has seen a lot of horrors and blood on the battlefield, but nothing prepared her for the horrors that waited for her underneath her feet in this dungeon. Darce stops to inspect a sigil to the old gods. This one was to the god of the depths, a ritual circle and sigil drawn in blood, probably drawn from the dismembered corpse only a few feet away from her. After hearing the sounds ringing in the halls, Darce encounters the first Maneba, a telepathic creature spawned from Rare that can read her inner thoughts, and is the first of many manifestations of the old gods infesting the dungeon. Though they are not major threats, they can still cause damage to Darce, and healing supplies are few and rare. They can also inject worms into her, which is never something that you'd want. The early part of the game consists of a lot of looting. These instances of RNG will more than likely provide you consumables to help keep your mind and health meter up, along with curing status effects and replenishing health. Darce's dark descent is just in its beginning steps. She descends to the third level of the basement and encounters a makeshift graveyard, some with graves unfilled. The shambling Goliath of the Iron Shakespear will be found on this floor. But more consequently for our run today, we also find Sir Seymour on this floor, the Heavy Knight. Like Tanaka, if you decide to fight him, he can provide some bonuses that will make the game a little bit easier for you, if you decide to embrace the darkness of the dungeon. Darce discovers a slain scarab and a trail of blood before running into the Heavy Knight. As soon as Sir Seymour sees you, he yells out, "Hold it," and then asks if you're still sane. He warns Darce, even if I may seem winded and wounded, I can still pack a deadly blow or two, so don't get any ideas. Unfortunately for Sir Seymour, we do have ideas about his claymore and chainmail hood that we can get if we beat him in a battle. The Heavy Knight introduces himself. He says, "I am Sir Seymour, a knight from the Grand Kingdom of Rondon. I serve my country to the last breath, just know that." Darce asks him if he's hurt. He hesitates and says, "You noticed it. Yes, I got hurt by that bastard over there," pointing at the bleeding and dead scarab. "Caught me off guard. The thing splurts out acid. Watch out if you ever run into one of them in the wild." Sir Seymour sees you getting ready to attack and says, "Very noble of you, attacking a wounded knight." Sir Seymour grabs his claymore and readies his battle stance. The heavy knight, as the name implies, wields a large two-handed claymore and is wearing thick metal armor. The first thing Darc'e does in combat is activate her defense stance skill, which will give her buffs to evasion and protect her from limb loss. Sir Seymour's claymore can't hurt her if it doesn't connect. With the defense stance skill activated, Darc'e would then start focusing all of her attacks on the heavy knight's arms, trying to stop him from being able to attack. All the while, Sir Seymour is yelling out taunts at you. He says that his claymore will cleanse this dungeon, and then asks Darc'e, "Are you still standing?" This pattern will repeat until Darc'e is able to disable his arms. Once his arms are neutralized, Darc'e will concentrate all of her attacks on his chest. At this point, the heavy knight has very little means of hurting Darc'e, so the fight is practically won. And before long, Sir Seymour becomes one more victim that has fallen to the darkness of the dungeon. Searching his body, we get our prize, the claymore and the chainmail hood. The claymore will give us a very big advantage in the early game with a significant damage output. Darc'e also starts with a shield, a plate mail, and leg guards, but no head armor. So equipping the chainmail hood gives her high level armor for all parts of her outfit, leading her to having very good defense. The downside to the claymore is that you can't use a shield with it since it's two-handed, so the chainmail hood offsets the loss of defense by not being able to equip a shield. This loadout will carry us most of the game. Once we curse the claymore, it would be a good weapon until the very end, and there's only two armor sets better than what we have now, the Gaunt armor set and the Penance armor. Let's learn a little bit more about the story of Sir Seymour. He was dispatched to the Dungeon of Fear and Hunger under the command of Lord Buckman. As part of a rescue team, Captain Rutimer had been trying to contain the outbreak of madness and violence in the dungeon and requested help. Sir Seymour, the Gaunt Knight, Sir Cerro, Jean, and Buckman were all part of the rescue team that very quickly fell apart once they arrived at the dungeon. Being unable to withstand the dungeon's physical and mental assault on them, the rescue team thought they were responding to a prison riot and unrest. They didn't know that the cogs of the god of fear and hunger were turning faster and faster. In the alcove with the crow statue, Darc'e finds a fire pit where she's able to cook some food. It's always better to have more food than not, going deeper into the dungeon. In the dungeon, Darc'e will encounter a series of mini-bosses, or tough monsters or encounters. That includes the Cavemother, the Salmonsnake, the Iron Shakespear, the Crow Mauler, and the New Gods. Generally, each one will have a weakness that you can exploit in order to beat them in battle. The Iron Shakespear is large, imposing, and can deal a lot of damage. Darc'e's defense stance skill increases her invasion, and the Iron Shakespear misses both of his first attacks. The Iron Shakespear's weakness is that his torso doesn't have a lot of health, which works out well for us since we have the Claymore, which can deal a fair bit of damage. 2 hits to the torso ends the fight, but the Iron Shakespear did land a lot of damage, leaving Darc'e with just 1 HP. The only loot that the Iron Shakespear drops is a useful key, and if you have a soul stone, you can get a unique item here. Darc'e continues her descent to the prison level. In the prison level, Darc'e will encounter Kahara, find the lever that will give her access to the caverns, and also find the peculiar doll, which will be useful for the fight against the god of fear and hunger at the very end. To reach the lever, Darce will have to sneak by an elite guard that is standing watch here. The elite guards pose a significant threat, so when spotted, I try to lure him out so I can try to run around him. I try sneaking by him a second time, only to run into a normal guard this time around. The normal guards only have one arm with a weapon, making them a much easier threat to manage. On the first turn, Darce neutralizes his cleaver, and then she guards on the second turn to negate his coin flip attack. One solid hit to the torso ends the fight. Killing a guard on this level will get you the cell keys F3, which makes it easier to reach Kahara and get the peculiar doll. For this run, we are gonna want Kahara's Endless Soul since it will unlock the End Guard skill, which will be instrumental to being able to survive the gauntlet. A simple crude doll depicting a long-haired man is laying on the ground. The doll gives you chills, and an eerie vibe can be felt from it. Encountering Kahara, he says, "Oh hey, you got me out of here. I'm Kahara of the South, a mercenary at your service." He explains that he was caught by the malformed guards. Kahara explains that he's feeling kinda weak after being left there for ages. "Would you mind if we travel together for a while?" But Darce refuses, since we're fighting all of the other playable characters that we encounter in this run. So again, on my first turn, I activate Defense Stance, causing both of Kahara's attacks to miss. Kahara uses a healing item, even though he hasn't taken any damage. Darce targets his sword arm, trying to disarm him, but she misses. Kahara retaliates, landing one hit. Darce takes another swing at his sword arm, but she misses again. Kahara, unlike Darce, is landing hits, slowly lowering her health. Darce misses again. At this point, I don't know if it's bad luck or all hits against his arm are going to miss. One of the two defensive buffs of Defense Stance runs out, so Kahara's next hit cuts off Darce's arm. So I reload game, learning that I need to change my tactics against Kahara. This time, I successfully sneak by the elite guard and pull the lever, activating the elevator to the caverns. Darce returns to Kahara's cell and challenges him again in battle. This time, I'll be focusing damage on the torso. I'm not going to bother trying to disarm him. Kahara's first two attacks miss, and Darce is able to land 400 damage points to his torso. A critical strike to Kahara's torso, landing 1200 damage points, ends the fight in our favor. Darce continues exploring the level, being careful not to step on this nail here. Darce sees a ballista guard and attacks. One strike from the claymore cuts his arms off. Darce defends against the guard's next two attacks. A tackle and a stinger thrust. One more strike to the chest and the guard is dealt with. Darce loots the guard's body and then learns that the guards aren't the only threat on this level. She stumbles upon an undead prisoner and uses the skill Talk on him. She says, "Prepare to die," to which the corpse replies that he wants to. And then the zombie stays still, allowing Darce a clean strike. In the open cell nearby, Darce finds an office. Investigating the desk, she finds the Captain's Diary number 2. Captain Rudimer, 30th of April, 1590. It was a mistake to take this position in these dungeons. It's next to impossible to keep any kind of order among the troops here. There are powers at play here that we as mere mortals cannot fight against. I've come to accept the madness. A naked prisoner crucified on a sacrificial statue with his guts hanging out, just another day in the dungeons. More and more troops committing suicide every day, more food for those left. orders to let some cultists do their wicked rituals here, anything goes. All the gore and macabre scenery has become trivial to me. The high priest demanded that we give them our prized prisoner, the captain of the mercenary army, the guard of the midnight sun. I hesitated at first. After all, his worth in propaganda alone cannot be underestimated, but those priests somehow convinced higher-ups of their ways. The guard was transferred to the lower levels, below the mines. I have no idea what the purpose is behind this. Nothing good can come out of this, but orders are orders. I feel bad for the poor man. It's obvious the Kingdom of Rondon backstabbed him, just because he was gaining influence at such a rapid rate. And now, his story ends here, defiled in some unholy practices. Finishing reading, Darce continues her way through the prison level, arriving at the blood pit. Wet ground feels squishy underneath your feet. Darce walks into a hallway of unimaginable gore where bodies have been dumped by the hundreds. Making her way through, she arrives at where prisoners are tortured. But it's not long before Darce hears someone approaching by their footsteps in the stone hallways. She prepares to ambush this wretched man. Darce comes face to face with Torturer the Torturer. He's a short, wretched man that enjoys his work a little too much. Fortunately, he's not too much of a physical threat, and Darce ends him real quick. Proceeding down the hallway, Darce encounters Buckman, who had been hiding from the Torturer. Buckman screams when he sees Darce. He says, "No, wait, you're a sane one, right?" "Yeah, of course. I'd be dead otherwise now." Buckman continues, "Don't stay in the doorway. You'll give us out if someone sees you." Darce asks what he's doing, and Buckman replies that he's hiding. Who would have guessed that a piss-stained cell like this would be one of the safer spots in the dungeon? Darce tells Buckman to get a grip. He replies that he's been lost in these dungeons for what feels like a lifetime. His sense of time has become blurry. It might be years, months, or, I fear, even just weeks. "I just cannot handle it any longer. I feel my mind giving up already. I just can't." "I don't know what business you got here, but if I were you, I'd run out as fast as possible, if escaping the place is even possible anymore, that is." Darce continues making her way through this level of the dungeon, going through a torture room filled with skinning knives and iron maidens. On the far side of it, she encounters a dark ritual, a man being sacrificed surrounded by 3 dark priests. Darce attacks the dark priest. Fighting them here will yield 1 soulstone, which is very useful early on when soulstones are harder to get. Though the goal here was to get the soulstone, not necessarily to stop the sacrifice. Carrying out the sacrifice will help increase affinity with Ulmer, which is necessary to unlock the blood portal skill. Darce proceeds to attack the last surviving dark priest. Searching one of the bookshelves in the room, Darce finds a copy of the book, The Penance Knights, and it reads, "The Penance Knights are a special unit of the Vatican City that wear tailor-made armors. The Penance Knights are used in the most perilous tasks and missions where the chances of survival are especially low. Thus, the armor has been designed only to be put on. There is no removing it once one is chosen for the mission. The armor has rows of small spikes that drill into the skin of the wearer. The pain is meant to cleanse the mind for the task at hand and also heighten the fury in the midst of combat. Because of the nature of the Penance Knights and the Penance armor, only convicts with life and death sentences are recruited to the unit. The recruits are given one last chance to repent their crimes and atone their sins before the Ascended One Ulmer passes on final judgment." Darce then searches the next bookshelf over, but failing the coin flip, she finds nothing. Darcy continues exploring this floor, making her way past the hallway, which is next to the room where the human Hydra is formed. The human Hydra is a mass ritual to Sylvian that merged together the bodies of dozens if not hundreds of prison guards. The human Hydra is a marriage of a large group of people, presumably having been driven insane or to desperation by the corruption of the Cube of the Depths. The Hydra is believed to be composed by a large number of the dungeon's former guards. What makes it worse is that it only desires one thing, a human child. And if you feed it one, it will comment on how tasty it is. Yum? A bit further down the dark hallway, she arrives at a library, where she finds another dark priest, Enki, lost in his studies. Enki says, "Please leave me. I'm not here to make acquaintances, and I fail to see what worth chatting with you would bring." When asked, "What are you doing here?" he replies, "What does it look like? I can see how a brute like yourself wouldn't understand the meaning of libraries." Like mentioned earlier, we are attacking all of the other recruitable characters on this run, so Darcy attacks Enki. While Enki may not be physically the strongest character, he does have access to some powerful magic spells, such as Locust Swarm, Needleworm, and Hurting. So I focus on disabling his arms so that he can't cast any spells on me, though he can still use Necromancy to summon some help. But without his arms, his head is vulnerable, which provides Darcy an opening for ending the fight. Searching the library, Darcy finds a historical book on the Fellowship, Chapter 1. The information in this book will be useful once we fight Valteil in Mahabre. The Fellowship, Chapter 1. The following pages tell the events that took place in the year 809, after the birth of our Christ, the Ascended One. The tale of the Fellowship is familiar to many, but few know the factual story of which all the poems and songs are made of. The Fellowship consisted of 5 people: Francois, the Dominating One; Nilvin, the Endless One; Valteil, the Enlightened One; Chambara, the Tormented One, and there was a 5th one, he who never aspired for the same greatness as the rest of the party, whose story bears no listeners: the Forgotten One. The Fellowship was formed to seek the older gods, who left humanity without guidance, without aid in times of great peril. The great kingdoms were slowly rotting away, and the grand values mankind once aimed for were displaced by defiled principles and practices. Back then, there existed an ancient tomb to ancient city Mahabre that worked as a hub for multiple different planes of existence, a place where a man could meet his maker. Those who would set their foot inside would end up in a forever going turmoil of godly dimensions and planes of afterlife. It is here that the Fellowship would demand the rights of self-governing for mankind, freedom to choose our own destiny and build the future we deserve. Darcy continues searching the old library and finds a copy of the Studies of Ulmer. Studies of Ulmer 1. Born from humble origins of a virgin mother, human origins, with the seed laid down by a false god, a god walking amongst men, Ulmer would gather 12 apostles from his most trusted companions. Together, they were to bring back the old world order. Kings and sultans of the time would not stand idle when a man of undeniable godlike posture came down to their golden city gates. Instead, they would capture Ulmer. The newborn god would be nailed on a cross, arms spread wide, and be left to the crows to feast on. But Ulmer was to ascend, arms still spread wide from the cross he would soar, becoming the symbol we know of today, turning his cross-ridden posture into something greater, a symbol of hope and dominance.
Spending 3 days and nights at the city of the gods, Mahabre, he would return among men. With his morning 11 apostles, he would murder the kings and the sultans of the time, as was just, bringing back the old world order. After looting the library, Darce backtracks and makes her way to the elevator, which will take her down to the caverns. Vast darkness embraces you with its cold emptiness. On this level of the caverns, we'll be encountering both Moonless and the Cavemother. Moonless will be joining our party for a little bit, although regrettably I will be using her for a sacrifice in order to get some affinity for Grogoroth. I need 2 affinity for Grogoroth to unlock both the Pyromancy and Blood Golem spells. In order to recruit the adorable Moonless into our party, you need to use the talk skill with her and then feed her rotten meat twice. Next, we'll be heading over to the Cavemother encounter. We can find a soul stone not very far from where we encounter her, and fighting her right now will give us the gnome egg, which will be useful for when we fight the Salmonsnake next. Darce hears something flapping in the distance in the darkness as she picks up a soul stone found among the rocks in the cavern. Soon, Darce hears something in the darkness. As with the other encounters, we'll be using the raw power of the Claymore to take down the Cavemother. One hit, and she goes down for the first phase of the encounter, and the Cavemother flies back into the darkness. The Cavemother, without her wings, comes running at Darce out of the darkness. Darce aims for the torso with the Claymore and puts down the Cavemother definitively. The Cavemother seems to be finally dead. There is an opening between her legs. You reach out through the mucus and find a gnome egg. We continue our descent into the darkness and the dungeon, crossing the threshold that will trigger the Crow Mauler to start his pursuit. A terrifying presence is entering these dungeons. Making her way down the mineshaft tunnels, Darce spots a person sitting off in the darkness. This is Nos Ramos, the 5th member of the New Gods, the Forgotten One. One of the few people to have resisted the temptation to ascend to godhood. The person disappeared into the darkness. The echoes of his footsteps sound distant before vanishing completely into the thin, moist air. If we just make our way down this tunnel a little bit more, we'll find a door that if we get past it, we'll be able to fight the Salmonsnake. The Salmonsnake is important because he can give you the Salmonsnake Ruin, a very powerful item that can prevent some status effects, but more importantly, dismemberment. Past the door, Darce finds a large room with a noticeable draft and littered with partially rotting and consumed bodies. She finds something shining just underneath the water and reaches for it. The Salmonsnake suddenly rises out of the water. Fighting him, I'll be using 2 tips. One is that you can feed him gnome eggs to keep him busy for a few turns. And secondly, if you take out his eye, it will make it a lot more difficult for him to be able to swat at you and land any damage. After that, I'm going to focus all damage on his head until the fight's over. It will take a few turns, but if I'm lucky, I'll be able to get through it without taking too much damage, if any at all. Fortunately, Moonless keeps attacking its tongue, which keeps it at bay. After the fight, Darce recovers the shining object, which is a stone crown. The stone crown, if used, will prevent the cave dwellers from becoming hostile at you. You can also recover a good bit of Salmonsnake meat from the Salmonsnake after fighting him. Cooking these will provide you a nice amount of food. That's always useful to have on hand. In the adjacent room, we'll find a ritual circle, which we can use to sacrifice Moonless to Grogoroth, increasing our affinity and unlocking some spells that we'll be needing. I'm sorry, Moonless. Concluding the ritual, we continue our descent into the dungeon, encountering the first of 2 yellow mages. Since I'm not recruiting Nazra nor Enki, I don't have any need for the talisman the yellow mages have. And using the claymore, I can finish the fight in one turn as well.
In the second Fear and Hunger game, there's a playable character that's also a yellow mage, Osa, a holy man trying to learn more about the old gods. Darce sparks a fire and starts cooking some of the meat that she has on her. Fortunately, since she only has to feed herself, cooking this meat will make sure that she's pretty much set up for the rest of her journey in terms of food. Once you know how to manage it, managing the hunger meter can actually be pretty easy. In the first game, the Devourer ability that Ragnavaldar has pretty much makes it so you never have to worry about food. And in the second game, if you choose not to recruit a Bella, you can get Henrik, and if you lead him to the food storage in the mayor's mansion, he'll cook you meals for the rest of the game. There's only 2 yellow mages in the dungeon, and they generally drop pretty good loot. So once you deal with them, you won't have to think about them again. Continuing through the darkness, Darce has arrived at the outskirts of the cave dweller village. Unless you give them reason to, they don't start off being aggressive. So their village can feel a little bit like a sanctuary, with good loot, a merchant, and of course, the Cube of the Depths. Every time you enter the village, there's a 10% chance that instead of finding the cave dwellers alive, they'll all been massacred by the Moonless Guards. Darce walks by the arranged skeletons of previous yellow mages. Makes you wonder what they were doing down here. Finding soul stones is always useful in the first game because they're a little bit harder to find and you have need for more of them, since you need them to curse weapons along with unlocking skills. And you also can't make offerings to the Tainted One in exchange for soul stone shards. A decapitated body hangs on the wall, demonstrating that the cave dweller villagers can be violent. There is a crude notebook on the table, but its contents remain a mystery to you. The writing consists of random symbols that lack all finesse. Searching this urn, I find the second leather helmet since I've entered the village. Yay. The villager with the yellow headgear is one of the few merchants in the game and the first one you'll encounter as you descend into the Dungeon of Fear and Hunger. Darce continues looting the village, looking for supplies that will increase her chances of survival. Entering this hut, Darce finds 2 of the villagers getting it on, but I have Dark Raccoon's censorship mod installed because I'd like to monetize this, you know. I get lucky and find the bone shears in the treasure chest. I won't be using them, but they are pretty powerful at the cost of accuracy, so they're pretty effective when coupled with the eyeglasses. Continuing looting, I find a 3rd leather helmet, because that's exactly what I need right now. Another decapitated corpse hangs on the wall, and its head has been made into a tabletop decoration. Human sacrifices seem to be a common theme here. Heading north, Darce arrives at the Altar of Darkness. This is where the Cube of the Depths is being stored by the villagers. One of the villagers is standing guard with a spear, making sure no one disturbs it. The Cube of the Depths is necessary to unlock the ancient door at the bottom of the dungeon that will lead to the city of the gods, Mahabre. Stealing this unholy artifact makes the villagers aggressive and they'll start to chase you down. Fortunately, they are tough, but they're not too quick. Darce's going to use the rope that she found in the village in order to descend to the lower level. The stench of blood fills the air as Darce encounters the wolf mask celebration to Grogoroth, a celebration of flesh. The masked gentleman seems to be in a very agitated state and is breathing heavily. Darce decides to participate in the ritual, consuming the flesh and feeling herself draw closer to the old god, Grogoroth, the god of destruction. The lust for flesh almost hooks her up, but not quite. With the act, your affinity with Grogoroth is growing. Darce sacrificing Moonless and participating in the feast will give her 2 affinity, unlocking more spells on the Hexen table. Darce turns around and starts heading back to the surface. We're going to be using the soul stones we picked up and the skills we unlocked at the Hexen table to get some more powers for Darce. Darcy feels a terrifying presence has entered the room. The crow maulers nearby. Dodging her way past the crow mauler, Darcy makes her way back to the surface and back to the hexen table in the courtyard. With her newfound affinity for Grogoroth, Darcy unlocks Blood Golem, which will allow her to summon a Blood Golem to help her in a fight, along with Necromancy, which allows her to resurrect ghouls. With her last remaining Soul Stone, Darcy is also going to unlock the Counter skill, which allows her to enter a defensive stance where she can retaliate against any attack. This skill is going to be very useful fighting against the Tormented One and the Gaunt Knight. Returning back to the entrance, Darcy is going to meet someone that just arrived in the dungeon, Isaiah, the Masked Man. He's a plague-infected map salesman that is wearing a very formidable iron mask. This mask can protect your eyes from the crow mauler's attacks, which can render you blind. He looks like a war veteran and has a very formidable stance. Looting Isaiah's body, we get the Iron Mask and 2 maps. Darcy equips the Iron Mask. It will protect her eyes from the crow mauler and also provides a little bit more defense. There's also a ritual circle not very far from here, so Darcy makes her way to it. In order to pray to Almer, we need to increase our affinity for Almer in order to be able to unlock the Blood Portal spell, which will allow fast travel in the dungeon. Afterwards, Darcy makes her way to the library where she finds the mock-up book, which will give her access to the secret back courtyard, where the Thicket can be found, along with Ragnavaldr. Also on this floor, Darcy will encounter statues to the Fellowship, the 4 people that travel to Mahabre to become new gods. We'll learn more about them once we've entered the City of the Gods. Darcy makes her way to the library, where she'll be able to unlock a secret passage using the mock-up book. Here, Darcy will be surprised by somebody else on his own quest in the dungeon, the Outlander from the north, Ragnavaldr. He shoots an arrow in your direction and asks you, "Are you evil?" He comments that nobody in these dungeons can call themselves a saint, but your presence here means that the dungeon will claim one more victim. He tells you that you're better off trying to escape. Speaking to him, he warns you to stay cautious in the dungeons. The evil in this place is of a pure kind. He adds that the interests of the evils in this place are past this world and is a relic of a much more ancient reality. He says that he comes from the northern people of Odengard. In the future, during the events of the Festival of Termina, 2 of the participants of the festival would also hail from Odengard, August and Abella. Ragnavaldr mentions that they found the dark continent to the west, Vinland. The moment you lay your eyes on the crooked mountains and the twisted forests of those lands, you feel the presence of a greater evil. It's that same evil that resides here. Rag explains that he's here to find a relic that a certain person took from his people, and that person is imprisoned down below. Little did he know that Darcy was holding that very same artifact. Rag will defend himself with his bow and arrow. Darcy uses the defense stance to have the agility to dodge his attacks. Darcy activates her recently unlocked counter skill, which still triggers even though the bow and arrow is a ranged attack. On his next attack, Rag triggers the counter attack and loses his ability to attack. Ragnavaldr has really high HP, so he can tank a few hits from the claymore. After the fight, Darce makes her way across the courtyard to where the bunny masks are in their ritual to Sylvian. Joining them and participating in the ritual will allow her to grow her affinity to Sylvian, which will unlock healing spells on the Hexen table. Darce is able to snap out of the trance, and she leaves feeling rejuvenated. Next, Darce is going to get some help. She makes her way to a skeleton that she saw on her first descent into the dungeon. Using necromancy, she's going to bring the skeleton back to life so that it can fight one more time, doing her bidding. Goat doesn't seem to remember anything about his past, but he doesn't seem to care. Darce equips the skeleton with armor and weapons so that he can be more effective in combat. With her new friend in tow, Darce returns to the Iron Shakespear to see how much more powerful she's become now. Starting the fight, Darce is going to summon a blood golem to turn this into a 3v1. For his first attack, the Iron Shakespear goes for the blood golem twice, which is great because the blood golem is serving his purpose as a tank. Afterwards, Darce is going to activate her defense stance skill to better prevent the Iron Golem from landing hits on her, although it's not foolproof. The Iron Shakespear has had both of his legs damaged, so his head now becomes vulnerable, and his head's the weakest part of him. One solid hit from the claymore takes down this giant Iron Shakespear. Now that she's increased her affinity with Ulmer, Darce returns to the Hexen table in order to unlock the Blood Portal spell, which will give her the fast travel ability. With the Blood Portal skill unlocked, Darce returns to the nearby ritual circle and opens the first one. Having wrapped that up, we are ready to descend into the Thicket, the cursed living tree in the back of the courtyard. The entrance to the Thicket is guarded by two jagged-toothed dogs, which might be related to the warhounds the new god Francois is raising. The defense stance skill raises Darce's evasion, which served her well since both the dog attacks missed. Darce also uses the counter skill again, so she can get free attacks when the dogs attack her. With the warhounds out of the way, Darce is free to enter the pulsating tree that's buzzing with insects. Here, Darce will have to find secret passages in the wall by pushing against the walls to find the weak spots, which will then open up a passageway for her to continue descending further into the tree. Her progress will be challenged by the Mumblers. The Mumblers are otherworldly creatures that are able to sap the life energy out of your very soul. There's no benefit to fighting them, so it's best to avoid them anytime that's possible. But in the narrow corridors of the Thicket, it's hard not to run into one of them. If you attack the phallic-looking head, it will secrete poison on you, which fortunately the skeleton is immune to.
A little-known servant of the God of the Depths can be found hidden in the Thicket. If on the first level, the player pushes their way into a series of secret doors in the walls, they'll be able to drop down a level and have an audience with the Cockroach King. You are able to speak with him if you have the mastery over insect skills. He'll call you a filthy human and demand that you kneel before him. If you play along, he'll give you an opportunity to serve him and move up in the ranks, and he gives you the title of Peasant. The Cockroach King gives you the task of going to the surface and killing the butterfly at his request. He mentions that they cannot allow him to finish his metamorphosis and fly away with butterfly wings. Completing this task moves the player up in rank to a noble and increases affinity with the god of the depths. Completing the second task, to kill a visitor to the dungeon who has long hair and is a priest of destruction, will move the player further up into the ranks of whatever the Cockroach King is king of, and will increase affinity with the god of the depths once more. The Cockroach King then mentions that his people have always wanted a new flesh of a home that has magical powers. I don't think Enki would approve.
Darce continues descending into the thicket by jumping into the holes in the ground. The air is very damp here and it's not easy to breathe. A powerful sword can be found here, but grabbing it will trigger a ghost to chase you. And we don't have any cursed weapons to inflict damage on ghosts right now, so I best leave it alone. Continuing her exploration, Darce continues descending down further into the tree. Since my goal is to eventually go up solo against Grogoroth, that means I need access to the gauntlet. In order to access the gauntlet, you'll have to find and cut 3 large purple organ bags, one of which is found on this level of the thicket. The sound of a ringing bell lets us know that there's also greater mumblers patrolling this floor. I best be extra careful then. These twisted corridors makes it easy to bait a mumbler in a certain direction and then run around him. Darce also picks up a soul stone, which can always be found here. This soul stone will be useful because I still need to unlock Kahara's end guard skill, which will be extremely useful in the endgame. Darce stabs the organ and it stops moving. 1 down, 2 to go. Finding another hole in the ground, Darce continues her descent and has arrived at level 7, the catacombs. Down here, at the bottom of the dungeon, Darce will find the second of the 3 purple organs, which she also cuts open and it stops moving. 2 down, 1 to go. The last remaining one can be found in Mahabre in the Golden Palace, but we won't be able to access that quite yet. Before arriving at the ancient door, Darce will find a ritual circle where she creates a blood portal. This makes it far easier to get back to the upper levels of the dungeon, including the Hexen. Next we'll have to deal with the Night Lurker that's blocking our path to the guard and the ancient door. The Night Lurk is a nasty little guy, but one solid hit from the claymore puts him down once and for all. Whether or not you find the guard alive in his cell depends on how fast you make it down to the bottom of the dungeon and to his cell. For this playthrough, I'm going for a solo run, and none of the endings I'm going for require the guard. I had no reason to rush down here and find him, so Darce makes it to his cell too late and finds the man that she loves, now gutted like a pig, in a pool of his own blood. Determined to accept this harsh reality, Darce decides to continue on her quest and figure out why Legard ended up in this cursed dungeon and what does it all mean, and to continue until she had solved the mystery of this cube of the depths that everybody seems to be after. Continuing her way to the ancient door, she runs into a flower-infested guard, but just like the previous ones, she puts him down mercilessly in combat. Using the blood portal she had just opened, Darce returns to the surface. She has picked up a few soul stones since she last visited the Hexen table. Unlocking a few more skills will only help her odds in Mahabre. At the Hexen table, Darce will unlock the Loving Whispers healing spell, which she unlocked through her affinity with Sylvian, the fast attack skill, which will allow her to attack twice per turn, and she'll also curse the claymore, allowing it to hurt ghosts and increasing its attack power, making it a little bit more powerful than the miasma. On her way back to the blood portal, To make her way to the ancient door, she would encounter the greatest combat challenge so far on her journey in the dungeon, the Crow Mauler. You feel the strong killing intent of the Crow Mauler as he hunts you in the stone hallways of this dungeon. The Crow Mauler effortlessly kills the skeleton as Darce starts using her fast attack skill, granting her an extra turn, and then using the defense stance skill to increase her survivability. Darce also has the face mask equipped that she got off of Isaiah, which will protect her eyes from the flock of crows attack. The Crow Mauler is staring at you with his empty eyes. The Cursed Claymore delivers enough damage to disable the Crow Mauler's main weapon in 2 attacks. From here, the fight becomes a slugfest, with Darce trying to take out the Crow Mauler's torso before he can use a peck attack and rip off Darce's head. Having applied enough damage to his torso, Darce, by herself, has taken the Crow Mauler down. That's one less horror in the world. Before descending again, Darce picks up the miasma. Approaching it, she hears voices inside her head. "You miserable mortal worm, you wish to use me?" Darce approaches the sword on top of a pile of corpses. It appears that the sword is the source of the voices in her head. Chaos, pain, and misery, those are the reasons I was created. Do you want me? Darce says yes. With the Soul Caliber in hand, Darce returns to the catacombs and makes her way to the ancient door with the Cube of the Depths in hand. She feels a pulse coming from the cube as the ancient door opens. A stale and close air fills the ancient hallways. In this ancient mausoleum, she makes her way past several walking dead. Here, she finds an ancient mechanism that seems to respond to the Cube of the Depths. Pushing the cube into the machinery, she's momentarily disoriented as the mausoleum seems to return to a point of former glory in the past. The Walking Dead zombies seem to be gone, but now replaced with the giant red men that Chambara has been torturing for centuries. The red man's scream echoes the empty hallways. Although the red men are extremely intimidating, especially with their howling, being chained up and tortured for hundreds of years does not make them particularly good fighters. Next to this passage, to the old city of Mahabre, a tomb holding a holy body may be found. The body of someone significant to Mahabre's past, the body of Ulmer, the Ascended One.
One of the things I like in games is when secrets hold further secrets, waiting for a curious player to come by and find them. In the tunnel area that leads from the bottom of the dungeon to Mahabre, there is a 3-part puzzle that I call the Push Blue Statues onto Gold Square puzzle. Clever, I know. Solving it will open a non-assuming door that leads to the Tomb of the Gods, a modest location housing the body of none other than Ulmer the Ascended, the messianic figure in the religion of the world of fear and hunger. Ulmer was born a regular person in the city of Jataya. He eventually became a Christ-like religious figure, leading 12 apostles who would spread his teachings. He eventually upset the powers that be and was crucified. Upon dying, he ascended to divinity in Mahabre and was able to resurrect. In a deviation from the traditional Christ story, he came back and took revenge on the kings and Pharisees that condemned him. His body can be found in the ancient tomb in the Tomb of the Gods. There's no real gameplay purpose to his body being found here, other than lore and ambiance, but there is one fun interaction. If the player has the necromancy skill available to them, they will get the option to use the necromancy on the old god. A coin flip is then triggered to see if the spell is successful. As always, it's whenever I'm recording that I get crazy odds and never get the coin flip that I need. But nevertheless, I persisted until the necromancy spell was cast, and several bottles of vodka and ale have been consumed. Not a bad time, I guess. The only effect that the necromancy spell has is to revive a part of armor, his equipment or package after casting the spell. It seems like Armor is happy to see you, or he has something in his pocket. So yeah, that's in the game. Unique if nothing else. I've never seen a game where you can get a god erect. Let me know in the comments if you can think of any other games that lets you get god hard. Next door to where armor can be found, in the Tomb of the Gods, there is a door behind which we'll find several manebas, servants of the moon god Rare, the jellyfish-like creatures that are encountered in the first levels of the dungeon. Past these moon servants, we find another type of moon-loving jellyfish, the Lady of the Moon. The Lady of the Moon will rise out of the green hue in the corner of the room and a battle sequence will initiate, but the lady will not attack. If you use the talk skill, more of her intents and purposes can be learned. If you ask her about her origin, she says that she comes from the green. If you ask her who she is, she says that she's a servant of the moon god Rare. She mentions that like the moon god, she doesn't believe that humans should have the same rights as gods. If the little girl is in the party, she will offer you a trade. If you give her the smallest one among your party, the lady will heal the wounds of the party and make everyone whole, reversing any dismemberment or physical damage to the members of the party. Like another creature of Rare, Pocket Cat, the Lady of the Moon is trying to stop any human of divine origin from ascending to godhood, so that they may never rival the powers of the moon god Rare or the old gods.
Darce exits the far side of the mausoleum, and an infinite bright horizon of the City of Gods opens up in front of her, laid out underneath the cold sun. Darce again uses one of the time warping machines with the Cube of the Depths, revealing what Mahabre looks like after eons past, dark and in ruin. It's in one of these darkened corridors where she encounters another surviving member of Sir Buckman's rescue party, Sir Cyril, who has long since lost his mind. He is wearing a heavy armor set of full-plated armor, which, along with the penance armor, is one of the best ones in the game. The Gaunt Knight is a formidable foe, with 2 swords and wearing some of the heaviest armor found. To overcome this challenge, Darce is going to have to rely on the counter skill, which will attack in retaliation for every attack the Gaunt Knight makes. Since he attacks multiple times with both of his arms, it's going to be a big advantage for us. After being disarmed, the Gaunt Knight is still a threat, though greatly reduced. Though it will take a few turns, concentrating attacks on his torso will eventually put this deranged knight to rest after his ordeals in the dungeon. The dungeon has claimed another brave soul, but now Darce will be better equipped for her own trials, now having an armor set made completely of plate and heavy metal, along with 2 very powerful weapons, the Miasma and the Cursed Claymore. Darce is now a little bit better equipped for her eventual and futile stand against the old gods. Afterwards, the brave mercenary captain continues pressing forth into the darkness, wondering what other ancient horrors do the old gods have in store here in this cursed place. And it's not long before she encounters one when she runs into the Lord of the Flies, a creature you will smell before you see. His stench hits you like a wall, and you can see maggots crawling underneath his thick fur. Just being in his presence gives you a violent urge to vomit. having such thick fur does present one vulnerability. He is very weak to fire, so I cast Pyromancy trick on him to exploit this. The new gods, when asked about the Lord of the Flies, will say, Valteil, the Enlightened One, in his attempts to understand the secrets of life, he accidentally created this being. The Lord of the Flies will roam Mahabre, looking for more subjects for experimentation that he can drag back to his master, the Enlightened One. Continuing to explore the ruined city, she will pass up the body of a white angel crucified and chained to the wall. Navigating the twisted and darkened alleyways of Mahabre, Darce will encounter yet another horror, a scarab, an insect that appears to have the unsettling face of a human. The scarabs don't pose that much of a physical threat, but they are able to eject acid onto you, which, if it lands, will destroy any weapon that you have permanently, making your trip that much harder and more dangerous. And I don't think I need to emphasize how dangerous it is to be in a place such as this with no way of defending yourself. To get access to the Tower of Torment and fight Chambara, Darce will have to find the secret entrance to Nazra's laboratory, which lies underneath the surface of the City of the Gods. Down here, Darce would find parodies of the human form, as she discovered some of Nazra's failed experiments trying to replicate human life. Among the lab equipment, she finds one machine that will take some of her blood and create a hollow human husk, which has the appearance of a human, but is completely dead and empty on the inside. Darce makes a small cut on her finger and lets some blood out. The blood mixes with the water in a most bizarre way. In the middle, the blood concentrates and slowly starts to grow mass. A few moments later, a human husk is fully grown. You've created an empty husk of yourself. With blank eyes, it stares at you, not realizing the resemblance you two share. The husk doesn't seem capable of anything constructive, and it mindlessly just wanders around the laboratory. On the far side of the cave that houses Nazra's laboratory, Darce finds a ladder leading up to a hatch that will take her to one of the entrances of the Tower of Torment. To encounter Chambara, the Tormented One, Darce would have to use one of the contraptions and travel back in time to the days of Mahabre's glory. In the past, when the new gods were at their prime, Darce returns to the Temple of Torment and makes her way to the sacrificial room in order to summon Chambara. Summoning the Tormented One would require a sacrifice, a blood sacrifice. Fortunately, the husk body followed you from the underground caverns. Darce hoists the husk up on the sacrificial machine with hooks that dig into the flesh, and then will start pulling out, creating immense suffering. This is when the Tormented One makes his first appearance. Chambara, a former poet, decided for him to truly be enlightened, he needed to understand true suffering. His appearance is muscular, but he lacks a nose, ear, and any skin on his body, as he's submitted himself to suffering for millennia. The Tormented One's main way of attacking is pummeling you with bare-fisted attacks. Fortunately, this will work very well with Darce's counter skill, since she will get one retaliatory attack for every time the Tormented One strikes her. Though it won't help her if Chambara uses his Chains of Torment spell. The Tormented One will present a much smaller threat once his arms have been removed. From there, it's just applying more damage to the head or the torso, and he'll go down before long. And that ends phase 1 of the fight. After disabling the Tormented One, Darce can get back to the ugly business of presenting a human sacrifice to the Temple of Torment. By turning the winces, she increases the tensions on the chain as they pull apart on the human husk. Blood is flowing from the freshly tormented. With the sacrifice concluded, rivers of blood flow again through the Temple of Torment. Darce hears something, as if something was rising from the middle of the blood pool. The Tormented One returns to fight us once again. Without saying anything, the Tormented One just stares at you. Darce decides to fight fire with fire. Through the power of Grogoroth, she uses necromancy and raises a blood golem to fight alongside her. The Tormented One is a strong and fierce opponent, so Darce would need all the help she could get if she was to take his soul and get her one step closer to the Golden Palace. The Tormented One stops his attacks, and he retreats closer to the center of the pool. A terrible sensation fills you, as if something's about to happen that should remain unknown to human eyes. Quietly, the wheels of torment swing around her axis. The Tormented One is surrounded by 3 concentric spinning circles, which can easily crush any human bones. To be able to attack Chambara, Darce will have to jam the external 2 wheels. Once they are jammed, the Tormented One in the center of this contraption will be vulnerable to physical attacks. Examining this weird contraption, you have to wonder if it was designed to hurt other people, or did Chambara make it to torment himself? Endless suffering in the pursuit of art. The Tormented One can be said to represent both the masochistic but also the sadistic aspects of human nature. With one last strike, Darce has overcome the skinless tormentor in battle. The wheels of torment, along with the Tormented One, sank into the pool of blood as silently as they rose from it. You feel as if a millennia of torment just slipped before your eyes. You almost feel sorry for this tormented deity. But any feeling of pity is greatly overshadowed by your feelings of accomplishment. Not just a personal accomplishment, but as if something greater had started to change. The cogs of fear and hunger have just begun to rotate on a larger scale. Darce now has the Tormented Soul, one of the 3 souls from the new gods that she is going to need if she wants to enter the Golden Palace and face destiny. Exiting the Temple of Torment, Darce notices that the streets of Mahabre have grown eerily quiet during her time in the temple. The crucified body of the White Angel is missing. The dead walk again as Darce sees the reanimated body of the White Angel with an exposed heart pulsating in its open chest, armed with 2 wings that also serve as sharp razor blades. Indeed, mere humans were not meant to gaze upon monstrosities and abominations such as these with our regular and innocent human eyes that have not gazed beyond the veil. When you stare at the abyss, be careful, for the abyss will stare back at you. The white angel sighs upon seeing you. His arms are twitching relentlessly, and his heart is beating slowly. The monster takes a step closer to you. Furiously, the white angel jumps into the air with little to no effort, spreading its wings wide. Perhaps evasion might be a better tactic to deal with the white angel. Escaping the white angel, Darce encounters a group of automatons, imitations of life made by Valteil, the Enlightened One. We'll be dealing with him soon. Darce asks one of them what they are and who created them. The busy figurine responds that the gods made them for work. Wanted them to build this place for them. So the figurines were created to do the bidding and the work of the gods. Darce also meets an intimidating figurine, a guardian. He was created to defend the city, and he's to look after it until the king returns. He says that the king will return one day, though you have to wonder how long he has been waiting here in this city where time means nothing, and a human lifespan is but a speck of sand on an endless beach. Darce climbs the stairs and follows the parade of ghosts to the Grand Library, the place where Valteil, the Enlightened One, does all his studying and his unholy research into how to imitate life and create artificial beings. Darce felt like she was being watched every time she took a step in this cursed place, this temple to knowledge that humanity was never intended to have. Searching a shelf in the library, she finds an ancient book detailing the studies of Sylvian. Sylvian is the goddess of love, lust, and creation. She created men and women at the dawn of time. From the very first moments, she loved her children greatly. Over time, her love blossomed into a more obsessive form, and she would try to guide her children more and more. Once she realized her children would never be able to return the same amount of affection back to her, her love took a more twisted form. Sylvian would shape mankind more to her liking and more into her image with her gift to people, the love magic, otherwise known as the flower magic. For a brief moment in ancient history, mankind fell into a craze of fleshly delights as a synchronized mass. Sea of naked people in the middle of coitus would pulsate and waste their days. There are still cults dedicated to Sylvian to this day, but many believe she left mankind behind long ago. Darce continues exploring the library, hoping to find Valteil. She does find a book that gives us more information about Valteil's attempts to create artificial life. These are my studies over the subject of creation of an artificial life form. Such ability transcends humanity and the limits mankind has set to itself. During my time as a man, walking midst people, such studies were frowned upon. The other scholars would bring such topics as morality and ethics to the table. But I believe this to be the final pillar we must overcome in order to ascend to the true god status, to be equals with the older gods, or even more. The older gods have shown talent for the creation of life since the beginning of times. The animated clay figurines that inhabit Mahabre are a perfect example of this. They are just golems, created for physical work. Without rest, they carry on their duties. The older gods would then create life for different purposes whenever necessary. All this, I believe, eventually led to the ultimate life form, human beings. This is the aim of my studies as well. I believe I understand enough to be able to accomplish this. I must achieve this. To be truly self-sufficient, independent of the grand scheme of things. This is the key to the natural progression, where man, finally, overcomes its creators. Signed, Valteil. So after all, the goal of the new gods was to replicate the power of the old gods. Valteil had been spending centuries researching and trying to figure out how to recreate human life artificially. Darce makes her way to the inner sanctum of the Grand Library and catches a glimpse of Valteil, the Enlightened One, the new god, as he stands on top of a bookshelf overlooking a darkened abyss. Without saying a word, he plunges in. Climbing down bookshelves and ladders, Darce makes her way into this abyss. Reality seems distorted here. As far as the eye can see, Darce could only see darkness and bookshelves. She started questioning her senses. It seems like Valteil's personality has started to affect the reality around us. Amidst the bookshelves, Darce finds another one of Valteil's books, Natural Doctrine 2. For my starting point, I've set my aims to create a worker class, being similar to the clay figurines of ancient times. There is one clear flaw in the design of the clay figurines, however. They are seemingly eternal beings. Only as they get damaged over time do they eventually perish. I do not believe my creations, my children, so to speak, should ever outlive me, their creator, their father. That is why I decided to create the life form from the very same fabric fragile humans were created from, flesh. The silhouette of the form is very sturdy in order to carry on the working duties. I was able to combine existing matter into one, and the life form has gotten its shape already. The hairiness is a side product of mode. It doesn't serve any obvious purpose, but I suppose it could keep the form warm in colder climates as well. I was able to achieve this form rather easily, and there doesn't seem to be any immediate flaws in its design either. Before going further with my studies, I decided to test different approaches as well. Besides organic matter, I decided to work in creating a mechanical life. Mechanical structures are far more simple than those created from flesh, so the figurine was ready in just a few years. The figurine is not strong enough for physical labor, nor do I need another one for the same purpose, so I repurposed them for my pastime pleasure. I have already achieved all this in a matter of few years. I can only imagine what I'll be able to achieve with the eternity I have before me. Signed, Valteil. Valteil was an arrogant scholar that saw life as a plaything for his amusement. He would create creatures and life simply for his amusement and his experimentation, irregardless of what life wanted. It seems like this new god had grown drunk with power and forgotten the benevolent original mission of the Fellowship. Darce reaches the bottom of the ladders and the bookcase. Beneath her, there is only the infinite expanse of the abyss, the darkness, the void. This is where she would have her confrontation with Valteil, the Enlightened One, the man that saw life as his personal plaything. Darce descends into the darkness. A giant, disembodied head with an exposed brain, composed of two halves, charges at Darce from the darkness. The new gods all have their individual weaknesses. The Tormented One's fury could be turned back on him using the counter skill. In the case of the Enlightened One, he can also be fought through knowledge. If you use a talk skill on Valteil, and initiate a conversation with him. He will quiz you on different parts of the lore of the game that you might have had a chance to read about in the different books in the dungeon. If you answer his questions correctly, each part of him, the head, and the left and right halves of the brain will each individually take a lot of damage. Doing this repeatedly and from the very beginning of the fight can make the entire encounter a lot more manageable, though you'll still have to deal with his black orb, hurting, and whispers of Grogoroth spells. Once both halves of his brain are disabled, he can no longer cast spells. Darce and her blood golem then focus their damage on the remaining part of the head, and before long, the Enlightened One fades back into the darkness and is defeated. The millennia of wisdom and knowledge that is too much for a normal person to bear passes through your head. You only get glimpses of what is waiting for you on the other side, but this information stream is too much for your mind to handle. Your head hurts a little. But that doesn't matter, as you can clearly feel how something greater has just started to change. The cogs of fear and hunger have just begun to rotate on a larger scale. You get the enlightened soul with you. That leaves only the endless soul to complete the 3 new god souls that we need to get access to the Golden Palace. Darce makes her way across the city, towards a tower in the sky that's reaching for the heavens. The Tower of the Endless, where she would have her next encounter with one of the new gods, Nilvin, the Endless One. Her trip across the city wouldn't be without incident. On her way there, she encounters another monstrosity of the city of the gods, the harvestman. The harvestman looks interested in you. The harvestmen roam the city of Mahabre. Like the Lord of the Flies, they are looking for offerings, for poor victims they can harvest seeds from. Navigating the darkness of the hallways of the city, Darce would encounter another one of Valteil's failed attempts at making a human life, the uterus, one of the creatures he created for pleasure. This abominable combination of metal and flesh is even capable of imitating one of life's basic functions, and that's to replicate itself. As an embryo crawls out of her and starts making its way towards Darce. As she lands the final blow on the uterus creature, Darce has to wonder if the uterus is better off being put out of his misery. Eventually, Darce reaches the tower that was reaching for the sky, the Tower of the Endless. She makes her way to the top. At the top, she finds an empty room with a lone bed. She lays down and closes her eyes to see if she can get a moment of rest after all these trials she's been through. As Darce falls asleep, restless dreams invade and take over her. Darce dreams of the kingdom of Rondon. She recognizes the streets, but something feels uncanny about the lights in the houses. Something feels off. As Darce explores this area, she has a series of odd encounters. One of them, in a brothel, she witnesses a scene of a young mercenary talking to his pregnant paramour about a job that he's taking that could potentially change their lives. and finally allow him a future where they can raise their baby. Cahara promises Celeste that he'll come back after he's completed one last job. She has another vision of something moving in the shadows. Another vision of a dark priest being crucified by his peers. He says that he's ready to meet his end, and this is as far as he's got. As he's crucified, he has a vision of the new gods, calling him to the dungeon of fear and hunger. He asks that the other dark priests take him down, that his mission in this world isn't done yet. Darce has another vision. She's up north, in the remote nation of Odengard. She's arrived at the aftermath of a massacre. Her troops, the mercenaries that her and Legard led, had massacred this village, searching for an ancient artifact, the Cube of the Depths. Ragnavadar, along with the other explorers, have returned, only to find out that their entire lives have been destroyed by the mercenary company, the Knights of the Midnight Sun. Darce had tried to challenge Legard's decision to carry their campaign up north, but Legard was determined and unwavering in his decision. Darce finds a solitary standing longhouse just a little bit up north from where she was. She has a vision of Ragnavadar shortly after he discovered that the unthinkable had happened. This formidable northern warrior would only have one purpose in life from here on in, and that's revenge against any monsters that might roam this world. He'd eventually become known as the god of ultra-violence. Darce enters the darkened longhouse. Past where the light from the door reaches, she sees a solitary figure waiting for her. This is the Skin Granny, a myth passed on by the wild men of the north and those who live in Odengard and its surrounding areas. The myth is typically told to new generations as a cautionary tale of what happens if you abandon your family and leave for greener pastures. The black is said to creep from the dark corners of your home cabin, slowly nibbling the form of your beloved ones. The creature is of course just a myth, but the tale lives on strong in the consciousness of the northern folk, and often in nightmares, the creatures have a vivid presence. The new gods, when asked about the Skin Granny, the Skin Granny will take the form of an old sewing machine with 3 arms and 2 legs. But, like a sewing machine, she's vulnerable to fire. Some speculate that the Skin Granny might be a form of a dream puppet, conjured up by the new god Novin as a test to see whether or not the protagonist is worthy of receiving the endless soul from her. By using regular attacks and leg sweeps, one by one, Darce disables the different limbs from the Skin Granny. And once she's been weakened, Darce delivers the killing blow, ending this nightmare. After which, she has yet another vision, but this one of her own past. Of a time before Legard led his forces north and attacked the northern kingdom of Odengard. Back in the past, when the world was simple and things were normal. The affairs of men were the affairs of men, and there were no gods, neither new or old, in their affairs, or so she thought. Legard is telling her about the prophecies, about a captain that would one day make an appearance to unite all of humanity and bring an era of stability, peace, and prosperity. Legard had asked Darce if she believes in these prophecies, and afterwards mentioning that he is the man, he is the chosen one, the man that's supposed to reach above and beyond and ascend past king and queens to become a god. A bare-breasted new god appears before you. Novin, I must ask you a favor. Our time has come. This form of existence isn't the answer that we were looking for. For mankind to break free, we need more. We need someone equal in size and stature to them. Novin rubs her slightly swollen belly. Please, I ask of you, just get my child out of here. Take her to the heart of darkness. Thank you. She fades away, and Darcy receives the Endless Soul, the last of the 3 new God Souls needed to gain access to the Golden Palace, where Darcy would encounter the dominant one, Francois. Yes, I am trying to pronounce that correctly. No, I'm not doing it intentionally. I'm just bad with that. Just that one name is just hard for me to pronounce. Darcy uses the Beacon of the Depths to transport herself to the present version of Mahabre. First, she needs the King's Key, and for that, she'll have to meet the older Francois. In the present, the entrance to the palace is guarded by the nameless figurine, who accepts an honorable duel with you if you have the Endless, the Tormented, and the Enlightened Soul on you. The Nameless challenges you to a duel. He's been guarding this entrance for centuries without anybody coming by. He was afraid he was losing his mind, so the Nameless figurine happily welcomes the duel. At least it's a chance to finally feel something again for him. And so they duel, but the Nameless figurine is going to have a hard time keeping up with Darcy's defense and attack skills, as she gradually whittles away at him, leaving nothing but his clay core. Darcy enters the ruined Golden Palace, a palace that has long since seen its glory days and now lies in disrepair and darkness. She hears barking not far. Here Darcy encounters an old, withered, and weakened Francois, the dominating soul of the new gods, member of the Fellowship, who is now well past his golden years. And it's been well over 800 years since he first arrived in Mahabre. The years have taken a heavy toll on him, and he looks like a man weighted down by regret. And he has seen more centuries go by than any one man should. Darcy could tell this man carried a heavy burden on his shoulders. The dominating one speaks and says, "Well, hello, my fair lady. If you are this far, it must mean another cycle is to begin, huh? It's all pointless, you know. We are nothing but puppets. There is no real domination. So yes, I am ready. Take this key. You will need it. Proceed back in time and you will find my younger self. Kill him and you will get what you are after. You get the King's Passage key." With the key in hand, Darcy walks away from the shambling corpse of a man and proceeds deeper into the ruined Golden Palace. There's one last thing she needs to do here, and that is to kill the last of the 3 purple organ bags that will grant her access via the God of the Depths to the gauntlet. You hear faint scream-like sounds echoing in the dungeon. Seems like an older presence has died. Just the idea is monumental and almost too much for you to bear. The path to the gauntlet is now open. But Darcy is not ready to go there yet. First, she must face off against the younger Francois, the Francois in his prime, in his golden years, when he was truly the dominating one. She will fight him in his prime and use his ego to bring him down. Returning to the past, Darcy uses the King's Passage key to gain access to the Golden Palace in its prime, at its peak. Entering the main corridor, Darcy is blinded by the reflections of bright light off of shiny gold that is everywhere to be seen. This was truly a golden palace, and its mechanisms are at full power. Darce makes her way through the machines of the palace, arriving at last at the Golden Throne Room. Upon the throne, she sees the younger Francois, gazing at her with a look of disgust and arrogance. The man radiates dominance, or at least his belief in it. Without hesitation and with absolute certainty, Francois stands up and engages you in a duel. Dressed in heavy plate armor and wielding a golden sword, the conqueror comes towards you. But like the other new gods, Francois has a fatal weakness that can be exploited to easily overcome him in combat. Chambara had his rage that can be channeled back at him. Valteil had his intellectual arrogance that could be exploited to cause him damage. Francois is a man of pride, a man that believes he walks among the gods, a man that believes that he is like none other. Shake his belief in that, and the rest of him comes tumbling down. Though Darce couldn't help but reflect on how Francois' pride reminds her of another man that she once knew, loved, and followed. Darce would use every combat trick she knew to take this man apart. Darce witnesses Francois' ascension to a golden idol, a flying golden god hovering just a few feet off the earth. But all the same, he was still the same proud and arrogant man that wanted to believe that he was above everything else. He says that he's past life and death, and he's closer to being a god than any other human has ever come. Darce takes great advantage of this golden idol being too preoccupied with his own pride, and she attacks relentlessly, striking him down. Francois the Dominating lays dying. Darce has proven her dominance over this old man who had tried desperately to keep up with the times. With Francois the Dominating falling, the order the new gods kept also came crumbling down. The remnants of their reign are quickly forgotten. Darce takes the Dominating so. Darce is now entering the endgame of her journey, but before going deeper into the gauntlet, or the void, she visits the Hexen table one last time to unlock skills for the last time. Here she will unlock the greater blood magic ability, but more importantly, the unguard skill that she gets from the Endless Soul. This skill will prove invaluable in the last leg of her journey. Now ready, she makes her way once again to the Cave Dweller village, where she'll be able to access the Gauntlet, where she'll encounter the Traces of Grogoroth and the God of Fear and Hunger. Fortunately, having a lot of unlocked skills, endgame equipment, and the Cursed Claymore does make going back to the mines and dealing with the ghost a lot easier. Almost trivial, some would say. With each of the recent fights, I've had one extra turn in the beginning, and that's because I initiated combat using the Enguard skill, which if used, will grant you one turn in advantage over your enemies. Once again, Darce makes her way through the Cave Dweller village, arriving at the far end and the Altar of Darkness, where she will find the God of the Depths, which will grant her access to the Gauntlet, the place where this story will meet its conclusion and decide the fate of humanity for the next millennia. The Gauntlet will be the most serious threat that Darce has encountered so far. A foul smell of sulfur fills the air. At first, Darce notices that the ground is uneven and it's hard to get good footing. Then she notices that the ground is writhing and moving underneath her feet. She is walking on a floor of insects. She doesn't have much time to dwell on that, since she has to make her way and dodge the Moonless Guards that are patrolling these halls. The On Guard skill is critical here. It gives you a first turn advantage, which Darce then uses to cast Fast Attack, which then gives her 2 actions per turn, giving her a full 3 actions before the Moonless Guard can even do anything. She disables the cleaver to prevent the threat of dismemberment, and then she focuses the rest of her attacks on the torso, or mouth, or whatever. With the Moonless Guard down, Darce goes deeper. Next, she'll have to pass through a barrage of deadly traps, including these swinging blades that will cut her in half before she even realizes what's happened. Next, she has to navigate a floor of protruding spikes that will stab her through her feet. If she's not careful, she might step on a weak point on the ground and fall through to the level below, where she will encounter an old nemesis, the Crow Mauler, or should I say the double Crow Mauler. This Crow Mauler is every bit as horrific as the previous one, except that it has sprouted a second crow head emerging out of the neck. Also, for reasons I don't really understand, this time he spawned without his characteristic arm maul, so that does make things a little bit easier. I also have the Iron Mask equipped, which prevents the flock of crow attacks from blinding Darce. The Crow Mauler uses the Peck attack, which can behead Darce in one attack, ending the game. Only the Penance Armor Helmet can protect against the Peck attack, but I get lucky this time, and the RNG is in my favor. Searching the Crow Mauler, Darce finds the Captain's Diary 3, which details Captain Rudimer's descent into madness. Captain Rudimer, 5th of August, 1590. I've had feverish dreams for the longest time now. In the dreams, the patterns on the walls, the caws of the crows, the swirling clouds, they haunt me even during my waking hours. I haven't had a moment of tranquility in months. It almost feels like the dreams become wilder, as the madness in these dungeons grows ever more stronger. I don't know which is the result of which. Did the dreams come before the madness, or are the dreams the results of everlasting chaos? Everything I see seems to remind me of the dream's otherworldly patterns. I swear the intestines of a gutted prisoner from yesterday took the very shape. But when I tried to describe its organic, ever-shaping patterns to scholars, or draw it down on this very paper, I failed to do so. Like a bonfire, with flames reaching out to a night sky, so it's a shape without a concrete form. These shapes are dangerous without a doubt. Effects like these are far too much for mere humans to comprehend. I'm the epitome of their obsession, so I know it better than any other. Maybe I'm the only sane one left to acknowledge this. Is it my responsibility to clean everything up again? The crows, they give their testament to my suspicions. I will start the purge. I will root out the madness. Only I can do it. I suppose Captain Rudimer is just another case of you either die a hero or live long enough to become a villain. Darce pushes forth and continues exploring this darkest of depths, the very bottom of the Dungeon of Fear and Hunger, where the traces of the gods may be found. She continues to navigate the traps, taking hits here and there. Soon she'll be facing destiny and death itself in the face. She'll still have to contend with some of the Moonless Guards down here, but fortunately, using the Unguard skill gives her a definitive edge. Darce bravely pushes on as she navigates the last set of traps before arriving at the place where her story ends. There's only one last guardian preventing Darce from reaching the place where she will have her encounter with Grogoroth and the god of fear and hunger, and that is the solitary lizard mage. The lizard mage is the unholy result of a marriage between a yellow mage and a wizard. In the world of fear and hunger, a marriage is a sacred ritual to the god of creation Sylvian, where 2, 3, or many more will get together on top of a Sylvian ritual circle, where they will then show each other love in celebration of the god of fertility, and then the flesh will merge into one convoluted organic mess. The Moonless Guards are also a result of this type of ritual, with the union between a cave dog and a prison guard. With some of the creatures found in the Dungeon of Fear and Hunger, such as the Yellow Lizard Mage and the Moonless Guards, it's probably best to not think too much about their origins. And it is curious that all the enemies found here in the Gauntlet are marriages. What does that tell us about the dungeon? I'm not sure. Let me know in the comments what you think. In Fear and Hunger, there are 2 levels of marriages available for the characters. If 2 willing participants go to a ritual circle and use the show love option, they will then merge, and then the player character will become a marriage. You might want to do this with your character because it does increase your physical stats, giving you high attack, replenishing your health all the way, and regrowing any lost limbs. But you are ugly now. If you use the show love option again, and you'll only be able to do it with a ghoul or Kahara, who is apparently okay with anything, then you become an abominable marriage. A singular person that's composed of the flesh of 3 different people. You get a little bit more attack power, but you lose the ability to equip armor, and you're ugly as fuck now. So in my opinion, it's not really worth it. But if you want a powerhouse character, you can perform a marriage and then get the penance armor. So you'll be an abomination in this unholy armor, which can make the game easier for you. But let's get back to Darce. Having bested every challenge the dungeon had thrown at her, she finally descends one last time and reaches level 9, the very bottom of the dungeon and the end of her adventure. She steps out onto a corpse platform made up of countless cadavers that appear here almost as a sacrificial offering to the old gods that don't care. Darce reaches the edge and looks over the vast, unending darkness. Darce feels as if she's in a place where humans don't belong, and she's witnessing something incomprehensible to humanity. But before we get to the encounter with the Traces of Grogoroth, which might be quite possibly the most difficult boss fight in between Fear and Hunger 1 and 2, let me tell you a quick story about one of my live streams. You've been listening to me for roughly 2 hours, so I'm hoping you at least find me mildly entertaining. And if you're watching this video against your will, good luck, I don't know what to tell you. You see, I can be a nervous, anxious person, especially before going on a live stream, knowing that people are probably going to be watching, and the video on demand will at least get some views afterwards. So naturally, I try to make sure that things go well, and there's not too many surprises. So I thought it'd be fun to live stream a Darce solo run and going up against Grogoroth, as we're about to see. So the night before the live stream, I decide to do a practice run. I get to Grogoroth, and while he is extremely challenging, I'm able to beat him on the second try. So I tell myself, how badly could it go on the live stream? Fast forward to 1 day later, I'm repeating the same playthrough I had just done the night before, and I make it to the Traces of Grogoroth. How many times do you think I tried before I gave up? I think my count was around 17 times. That's when I felt I wanted to tell the viewers like, hey, You know, normally I can do this. I'm just tired and it's cold. This doesn't usually happen. But yeah, I walked into the situation so confident I knew how it was going to play out, but Grogoroth pulled a fast one on me. Eventually, I loaded up a different save and ended the livestream by being the God of Fear and Hunger, which is actually a far easier boss fight. But anyway, I just want to revisit that story because I still laugh at myself about that. Back to what we were talking about. Darce versus the Traces of Grogoroth, the very god of destruction, one of the primordial and fundamental elements of reality, destruction. An ancient and primal terror fills your mind and body. Grogoroth casts the Whispers of Grogoroth on Darce, giving her 5 turns before the curse takes effect and she dies. With her first action, Darce summons a greater blood golem. She hopes the blood golem will be able to distract Grogoroth momentarily long enough for her plan to poison him to work. The White Angel's soul equipped, she's vulnerable to dismemberment, and she's already lost her first limb, meaning that she's no longer carrying a shield. But the extra turn is absolutely vital to her survival. Darce throws a poison dart at Grogoroth, inflicting the poison status effect on his torso. Now, all she has to do is survive long enough for the poison to take effect on this apparition of the traces of an old one. Darce has an opening and casts Pyromancy trick on Grogoroth to help the poisons work and bring him down. Regardless if she wins or loses, Darce will never be a whole person again. She is witnessing something not meant for human eyes, standing in the shadow of such a gigantic being. She is fighting against the very fabric of reality itself. But she is persistent and tenacious, healing herself when she gets a chance, and guarding, trying to minimize the damage this monstrosity can inflict on her. She knows that the fire and the poison are working on Grogoroth, so she falls into a pattern of guarding on one of her actions and then healing on the other one, hoping to stay alive long enough for the fire and poison to do their work. The constant barrage of attacks from the claws of a god keep her ever on her toes, until one moment happens and Darce can't believe it. At least momentarily, and on the surface, she has survived the encounter with the remnants of an old god, as the Traces of Grogoroth lose interest in her, and the combat ends. The unholy traces of the old god ask Darce, "Why do you resist, human?" Darce says to crush the old gods, but the Traces scoffs and explains, "I am nothing but a shell, a fraction of the traces that is left of Grogoroth. Yet even I could crush you in this moment. The older gods, they do not even exist in this world anymore. The older gods are too pure for this world. They are the true forms of the feelings and ideas that linger in men. But humans, they are too tainted by their own mind and ambitions to understand purity. Think of the perfect shape of fear and destruction. Now, take a look at the world you delve. Do you see that shape? That shape? The shape could never exist among men because the shape varies between every human. If you could truly see the shape everyone shares, it would shatter the individual mind and existence. Humans are weak. I can reveal the true form, glimpses of it. Darce accepts the offer, and she peers into the darkness behind the veil. Your sanity declines at an alarming rate. You are gasping for breath desperately as the shock and horror shut down your bodily functions one by one. You feel terror run wild inside of you. Despite being hardened by the horrors of the dungeon, nothing you've witnessed so far could have readied you for this primal fear. You cannot operate in any way. Your body has shut down, as that is the only escape it can come up with when facing this older being. Your life runs past your eyes in a heartbeat. The biggest regret you have was to ever set a foot in these dungeons. You now realize that the whole experience was predetermined since the very first second you laid your eyes on this ancient fortress. You never escaped the Dungeon of Fear and Hunger. No one ever heard about you again. Without a trace, you vanished from this world. It's almost as if you fell out of history books altogether. Your screams of terror never reached anyone. Your long quest only gave you hints about the greater scheme of things. You learned a fraction of the secrets the ancient world holds. But even that is more than what is meant for human ears. Ending B, the older one. But what if things had played out differently for Darce in the dungeon? What if she'd given in to compassion in those early levels of the dungeon when she saw a small child, a little girl, in a cage, and she was moved by the kindness still in her to let the girl out and try to protect her as best as Darce could? What would have happened then when they arrived in the gauntlet? Darce couldn't have known that these decisions would lead her to an encounter with the god of fear and hunger, which would then, in turn, trigger the cruel era and change the course of humanity from there on in. So let's see how else the story could have played out. Returning to what could have been Captain Rudimer's office, Darce approaches the cage where the little girl is held. The little girl looks timid and harmless, though she looks dirty and obviously neglected. Darce opens the cage, and the little girl slowly makes her way out. She looks at Darce with a warmth in her eyes, but a frigid coldness in her face. She doesn't speak, but she starts to follow Darce. During their time in the dungeon, Darce would find two separate items that she would give to the girl as a gift: a peculiar doll and a small knife. Both of these seem to bring a sense of momentary joy to the girl, as if it were the only kindness that she's ever known in her short life. Her first ever gifts. Darce follows Nilvin's, the new god's, orders and takes the child to the heart of darkness, the gauntlet, the place where this would all end. The events that transpired here would cause the child to change the course of human history, triggering the cruel era, an era when humanity needed to adapt to a hostile new environment. With the stability of the previous era broken, humanity would have to adapt to famine, disease, all sorts of natural disasters, and would eventually develop science, which hundreds of years later would lead to a separate set of events that would play out during the Festival of Termina and Prehevil. Making their way through the traps, the dangers, and the creatures of the gauntlet, Darce and the little girl arrive at the very bottom, what Nilvin had called the Heart of Darkness. Darce notices that the girl doesn't really seem shocked by the events around her and the horror in front of her. As they approach the mound of corpses that overlooks eternal and infinite darkness spreading out in front of them, the girl seems to admire and be mesmerized by the darkness, staring out at it. As if driven by something greater than herself, the little girl walks up to the edge of the corpses and stands over the stark and pitch black. Darce feels something is happening. There is a change in the little girl. The girl has a concentrated and serious expression on her face. She falls to the ground, twitching. The girl is rolling on the ground, seemingly in pain. Something is happening to the girl. She is rolling on the ground even more furiously. You can feel an entirely new presence in the darkness. The god of fear hunger is born. The girl transmutes into an older, marble-looking form of a woman. She looks twisted and wretched, yet with a sullen beauty. The god, formerly the little girl, seems to reminisce, looking at the dagger on the ground. She also notices the peculiar doll, and she seems lost in thought momentarily. For a while, she's not paying attention to you. The god of fear and hunger has taken a new and yet more monstrous form. Darce notices that something is happening to the god. She seems to be in grueling pain and shivering from the cold. The god of fear and hunger takes another extremely monstrous form, where she's splitting down the middle and appears to be a centipede but with arms, almost as if she were giving birth to herself, to her new form. Something is happening to the god. She again appears to be in extreme pain and extreme cold. The final and the true form of the god of fear and hunger manifests as his old dead skin falls to the ground. A new shape emerges. Darce can feel the fear emanating from the god of fear and hunger, and she watches the newborn god mutilate itself, harnessing its own pain. Darce is in pain, bleeding and poisoned, but none of that would matter soon, as the fighting ends. The god of fear and hunger acknowledges your suffering. Darce lays on the ground bleeding. Level 10, the bottom. Why do you resist? The thought must have crossed your mind at some point. The thought that you delved too deep. The thought that this would be a one-way trip. So instead of fighting the inevitable, why not embrace it? Just lay down and rest. There is beauty in this darkness that can be harnessed and used to usher something new. You never escaped the dungeons. Your efforts would go unsung, but your part in the greater scheme of things was vital nonetheless. You had a vital part in the birth of a new god. One that is not a mere new god, but one that rivals the older ones. You had the first-hand experience of witnessing the coming paradigm shift the world is going to go through into a new era. An era of the newborn god, the god of fear and hunger. They'll come to know this day as the cruel age. An age where a human-born god would finally rise after millennia of mankind's struggle as the feeble new gods. Maybe your fate was an act out of mercy. The last traces of compassion the newborn god shed after her true ascension. Your demise was peaceful after all. Ending A. The god of fear and hunger. But yet, there's still another way things could have played out. What if, instead of descending to the gauntlet, Darce seeked the power of the new gods for herself? What if she had returned to the Golden Palace and sat on the throne herself in an attempt to ascend to godhood? What would happen to Darce? Well, let's find out. Darce marvels at the splendor of the golden throne room. At the same time, she is chilled by the eerie, cold quiet of these now vacant halls. You get close to the throne. You feel air standing still. You feel electricity and excitement radiating from the chair. Your heart is beating fast. It feels like the throne holds great significance to the greater scheme of things. The throne of the new gods is sitting here empty, waiting for the successor to the past gods. Darce sits on the throne. A pitch-black new world is unveiled before you. A cold wind carries over unnatural cries from all around you. You are not alone here, even if it would seem otherwise. A terrifying presence has caught your scent. Darce gets the feeling that she's being watched and she's not alone as she explores the green hue of her surroundings. She is now in the void, the place where the lizard men that ascended were transported to before her. More and more, Darce feels the ground shaking underneath her as something large is moving very quickly in the darkness. She gets the primal urge to hide somewhere. Something big is moving in the darkness. A great beast is advancing from the shadows. Darce sees what appears to be the king of the lizardmen. A giant Tyrannosaurus Rex with his eyes seemingly bound shut. This creature must hunt strictly by scent. Darce is going to need to use every trick she knows to survive this encounter. You can smell the rotten breath of the blight. If you ask the new gods about the greater blight, they'll tell you, before men, the lizard men roamed as the dominating life form. Like us, they too desired to ascend higher. What remains of those ancient times are the forms. The greater blight is something that rivals the powers of the new god, even in this day and age. It is truly curious how powerful those ancient relics were in their true prime. After defeating this lizard monstrosity, Darce continues her exploration of the void, looking for her god form. If you're playing in terror and starvation mode, Darce will have to overcome one more challenge here in the void before she can have the encounter with her new god form. It's here in the void that she will encounter the traces of Sylvian, the god of creation. Sylvian, the biggest threat in the void, only found dwelling in the green hue of this area. These are just the traces of Sylvian, so not the true goddess, but rather a weakened apparition of her that's been left behind with the passage of time. I'm going to be a little bit light on the lore for Sylvian since I've covered this god a few times in my other videos, and I don't want to repeat myself too much, but Sylvian is the god of creation, the antithesis to Grogoroth, the god of destruction. They are both primordial old gods that rule over the world of fear and hunger, representing basic aspects of reality. The god of love and fertility will be found on the path to the new god. She physically appears as a rib cage with a few tentacles and other appendages growing from it, along with Rare, the machine god, the god of fear and hunger, and the Traces of Grogoroth. The Traces of Sylvian is another god or deity that can be fought and bested by mere mortals, following in the grand tradition of so many JRPGs, in which humans try to kill a god. She will attack with her many tentacles, sapping the party's health. The color of the unknown attack
will drain the party's mind, making spells and healing more difficult. And lastly, Sylvian will grow a tumor that over a few turns will take a form of one of the 4 player characters and start attacking. The Kahara tumor will use critical stab attacks, Darce's will do leg sweep attacks, Enki's might cast hurting or locust swarm, and Rag's will fire iron arrows. But if the player is well equipped and you play your cards right, the Traces of Sylvian are defeatable. After her traces dissipate, the path to the new ascended god is unlocked. Upon a summit, she encounters herself but as a god, as a newly ascended new god, a once human but now deity. Your god form says, "We've been submissive long enough. Can't you hear our soul yearn for more? We can dominate. You can dominate. Just leave your earthly body behind and let us ascend. Let me dominate those that need hurting." A new god greets you and asks, "What is true domination?" There is no domination if there are no weak. That is a law of nature. There is no shame in admitting that you want power over the poor and the weak. You, yourself, have sought domination by getting this far. You wanted to prove the others that you got what it takes. You wanted to dominate the oppressive and hopeless darkness. As time will pass, would you tell people about your monumental achievement and share your gospel? How you passed through all the hardships the dungeon laid before you, and about your eventual ascension? Stories about your fabled endeavors are passed to people of all ages. Your tales inspire many in the times to come, from children to the elderly. In the coming era, mankind is at the brink of chaos. Diseases run wild, and kingdoms wage war with hundreds of thousands of casualties on all fronts, both women and children included. You would have the power to interrupt and potentially stop this. You have the strength to stop the mindless killing, but that would require you to step out of the plane of this void. Instead, you could try to affect mankind through religion and beliefs. Affecting the whole culture means slow change, and its effects don't save those in immediate peril. But religion might have more long-lasting effects. You leave your golden throne to disrupt the ongoing wars. With overwhelming strength, you crush entire armies that stand in your way. Kings and sultans of the time are left in terror before your power. Once you are done with your rage, mankind is left in a state of chaos. Common people got no one to turn onto, and thus they seek the safety from smaller tribes and communes. By meddling with mankind, you ended up halting the technological and cultural progress. People are also less self-imposed because of relying on gods in the past. The civilizations are back to Iron Age structure, where physical strength is the only thing that matters. You watch other deities and gods fall around you, one by one, as men revolt against the old world order. However, your gospel, back in the day, was so strong that people remember it loud and clear. Your legacy had only grown stronger with you crushing the warring kingdoms before the chaos begun. Men fear you. You are known as the fierce god, and because there are no other gods left to rival your power, you become the one and only god, despite your strength being limited to that of a new god. You never escaped the dungeon of fear and hunger. Instead, you chose eternal void and darkness as a new god. Ending D, a new god. Another way that Darce's journey could end is if Legard survives and is escorted to the Golden Throne, where he will sit on it, revealing that that was his plan and goal the entire time. After sitting on the throne and ascending, he will be known as the King in Yellow. The literary figure of the King in Yellow has almost become a trope in survival horror these last few years.
being a prominent theme in both Signalis and Fear and Hunger recently, arguably in Dark Souls as well. I've been fascinated with this figure since hearing about it, a mysterious play about a king that drives anyone insane that reads it. The mystery of the king is almost as alluring as actually knowing about him. The lack of lore and information about him only deepens the mystery. In the game, the king in yellow will only appear if the player assists the guard to his ultimate vain and selfish goal of ascending to godhood, encountered as a final boss leading to the C endings. Canonically, we know that Legard does in fact ascend to godhood and survives the events of Fear and Hunger 1. He then proceeds to spend hundreds of years working in the shadows on his next plan of attack to take out the old gods, to free humanity from their grasp. In combat, he's notable for being one of the opponents with the greatest ability to heal himself, with both the asterisk he can summon and the snake having healing abilities. He will attack with his sword, and every few turns, he'll use the salvation coin flip attack, which will blind the player if failed. Either way the fight goes, the guard ascends to godhood, fulfilling his ambitions and plans, and setting the stage for Fear and Hunger 2 Termina. So those are 3 endings to our story, but there are many paths that time can take. What about Darce's character-specific ending, which the community takes as the canonical ending, her S ending? In this version of events, only accessible through hard mode, Darce enters the dungeon, but this time she is looking for parts of an ancient spell that can go against one of the fundamental truths of reality. That which is dead cannot rise again. By exploring the ancient city of the new gods Mahabre, where time is just an illusion, she finds the parts to her spell, and then she returns to the cell at the bottom of the catacombs, where she finds her beloved and murdered Legard. Doing what she thinks is best, she casts a spell, not knowing the millennia of repercussions her decision would take. The once beautiful Legard rises, but this time he is not his old self. He appears to be more like a blood golem, a spirit that inhabits a body rather than someone that's alive. And this is the last we would know about Darce, that she was the one that resurrected Legard, who would then go on to be the Kaiser of the Bremen Empire, once everybody alive at this time has been dead, and for a while. Ending S. Wow, so you made it all the way through the video. Thank you very much. The algorithm loves it when people watch videos all the way through, so it's a big help for me. I hope you had a good time. I know I did making it. Thank you very much for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, consider leaving a comment and hitting the like button. But that's all for now. I'll see you soon enough. Thank you very much. Later.